What's up, Foxden? Fox here, and today we are talking about Halo Infinite versus my gaming laptop. Join the Foxden Discord down below. And if you like my content, consider subscribing. So this is my first video in my dorm, and I'm really trying to get some more tech videos out with you, but it is a process, and I'll be talking about that at the end of this video. With that said, right now I want to talk about the Halo flight. I'm going to have an opinion piece on my second channel if you want to check that out, but I played both of the test flights, so 4 hours and 4 hours today. So I played way too much Halo for my own good. My eyes burn, but I decided to do some tests on it on my gaming laptop for you to see, because a lot of people have had performance issues. This test flight hasn't been much better in that regard, and I'm going to be very interested to see how the Series X and especially the Series S handle 120 and 60 FPS, considering the girth of my laptop and what it has inside of it. I don't know how these weaker consoles are going to be able to hit that goal, because I'll tell you how hard it is to run this game at 120 FPS on my laptop. With that said, my laptop is an Electronics Mech 15 G3. It has an RTX 2070 Supermax Q, which is the biggest GPU you can fit inside of a laptop. It also has a i7 1080 16 gigs of RAM, a 1TB SSD that came from the factory. It's NVMe. And then I also have 2 TB of NVMe storage that I installed myself. The cooling solution in this laptop is not fantastic, especially on the CPU. The GPU honestly is fine. I never see it go above 80 degrees, whether that's because of throttling or because the cooling system is pretty strong. I didn't get the Arctic Grizzly stuff because I thought that was a marketing ploy when I first got this laptop, and it was an extra $40, and I think we all know Arctic Grizzly doesn't cost $40. With that said, this machine does run hot with the stock pace that they have in the factory. It gets up to about 95 degrees when playing CSGO, and that is only with about 50% usage, so it's definitely not a great cooling solution in a laptop, but for how thin it is and the reasons why I wanted to use it, I think it's great. I only get about 4 hours of battery life with everything on battery saver mode because it is an Intel system, as well as a RTX 2070 Max Q without any Optimus enabled. It has a fully backlit keyboard that you can change the colors of, as well as a 1080p 240Hz panel, but I was using my 144Hz 1440p panel for these tests, but we did go all the way up to 4K just by using the resolution scale in game. So let's hop into the benchmarks. So the first thing that I like to do with video games that came out is set everything to ultra and be way overzealous and overconfident, and that's exactly what I did with the Halo Insider preview. I was playing on Big Team Battle, which does generally reduce frame rates compared to regular Team Slayer, but the reason why I did that is because there's only one map in the rotation, which meant that I could get a fantastic control group for all of my different benchmarks. So at 1080p with everything on ultra, Halo Infinite ran at 63 FPS on average, and it looks very beautiful up at ultra. I really like the style of this game. It reminds me of like what Halo 3 would look like modernized, but with video game features from Halo 5. I was using Windows Game Bar, which is quite different than what I usually use with MSI Afterburner, but it's a great way to get quick FPS averages inside of Xbox games that generally don't do very well with MSI Afterburner, and this was no different. There was a lot of lagging and a lot of crashing, but since this is a test build, I can excuse that. But the resolution that I personally play at is 1440p. I think it's a solid middle ground, and with everything on Ultra at 1440p, we saw an average of 51 frames per second, so below that 60 FPS threshold, and it would honestly have been perfectly fine if it stayed at 51 FPS consistently. The problem is some parts of the map were going up to 60 FPS and other parts of the map were dipping down to the low 40s, and that creates a lot of staggering, and that's where VSync may be useful. But for me personally, I would just turn down the settings and play at 1440p, or use that automatic thing that they have in their menu, which is great to use, that sets a minimum FPS. Now it's time for the big boy, 4K with everything on Ultra on a 2070 Super inside my overheating laptop, got 29 FPS, so not quite playable, and that was generally below 29 FPS than it was above 29 FPS. So it was regularly in the 23 to 25 range, but the average came back at 29 since that's where the frame rate was at most of the time. This was a generally unplayable experience, and if you plan to run this at 4K, you either are going to need an RTX 3090 and SLI or turn the settings down. With that said, the next thing I did was turn everything down to medium, which quite frankly still looks very good. The only thing that I would really do is turn anti-aliasing up I'm an anti-aliasing nerd even on 1440p. But with that said, everything on medium at 1080p, we got 85 frames per second. So a much smoother experience in which you will not have dips below 60. And that is a very, very smooth, fantastic frame rate that you will not notice any dips because it is above that 60 FPS threshold. And although I am absolutely in the corner of you need a 144 hertz monitor to play competitively, and you can absolutely feel the difference, the jump between 60 and 80 isn't going to destroy or disrupt your gameplay session as much as going from 50 to 40 will. And once again, in my sweet spot, 1440p, we saw an average frame rate of 62 FPS, so we got above 60 FPS, but again, not all the time, and this was still kind of disruptive. That's where I would feel like the medium preset with an FPS minimum counter on it would do a better job, because then it will automatically adjust the resolution when it needs to keep it above 60 FPS. But with everything on medium, 1440p generally ran pretty well. No complaints for me there. And at 4K, we finally got above that 30 FPS threshold with an average FPS of 36. And generally speaking, it stayed stable enough that it wouldn't go into the low 20s, but there were moments here and there in which there was noticeable slowdown. So for 4K, I would maybe go for medium low. 1440p, I think medium's fine, or what I do is I crank 1440p up to high, and then I use that frame rate minimum to adjust the resolution, because 1440p and 1080p, if you go in between those, it won't happen very often, so I think that's perfectly fine. But that's all the tests that I had today. Now this is going to be interesting. The Xbox Series S and even the Series X don't have the most powerful hardware. If anything, if the GPU market wasn't as bad as it was, I don't think an Xbox Series X or One S would be viable right now, because you can play every single game on PC that they give for Xbox One Game Pass. And how they are going to manage to get this game to run at 120 FPS on the Xbox Series X is going to be a feat. I haven't seen gameplay of it. I think that Infinite Flight actually runs at 120 FPS, so that hopefully is a very good experience. If you have an Xbox Series X or S and you want to share your experiences down below in the comments, please let me know, because I'm very curious. Because as a PC, I don't want to say master race because that sounds very bad, but as somebody who has played PC for so long, I don't really see what Xbox does. The last Xbox that I owned was the Xbox One X. So if you have those, please let me know in the comments down below. With that said, this game needs some tuning. I ran Gears 5, an Xbox One exclusive that came out in 2019, so not super long ago, on an i5 11600K integrated GPU and got above 30 FPS. If I put this with any integrated GPU, I don't think it would be playable. And because it is Halo and the art style is so much Halo, I feel like they could go lower with the settings than they do. Like I said, medium still looks beautiful. I think there should be a lowest setting. Even if it looks more like Halo 3 than it does a modern day Halo game, a lot of PC gamers, including myself, care more about frame rate than they do visuals in competitive games, which Halo's multiplayer generally is considered to be, and I would personally want a higher refresh rate on that. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes in the future. With that said, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a dorky little video. I want to talk a little bit about the dorm situation, because making videos in a college dorm is very hard when it's about 100 square feet and you have to set up a motherboard and switch out graphics cards all the time. And I am lazy. I will be the first one to admit that. So I definitely want to get a table here so that way I can do those tech videos in the future. And I may just set this up for tomorrow to test a bunch of different graphics cards with Halo Infinite on the second flight that night, but I'm not entirely sure. I really want to, so I think that's something that I'm going to do. But with that said, it is still definitely up in the air right now. Thank you so much for bearing with me, and thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, like, subscribe, do what you usually do, and as always, buy yourself something nice.